Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Thanks for tuning in to the next episode in the series. In the last episode, we created a new app icon for both the regular traditional icon and the rounded icon. If you missed it, check it out. But we created a pretty sweet uh, icon and went over a great resource that's publicly available to create the proper files that you need at the various sizes and stuff like that. Today we're going to talk about something in the Android system that is known as the shared preferences, and it's kind of a simple way to persist data between your or for your application between runs, right? If we favorite this um, Manchester United tile and close the app and then come back to it, or close the app and I don't know, go to something else and then resume uh, you know this application at some later date. Since the application hasn't been killed, it kind of saves the state and things are still there, so this is still favorited. However, if we go ahead and kill this application and open it back up again, everything resorts back to like the default, the way that it was set. Many times you'll find yourself needing to persist particular information between between sessions in your app, so that let's say your user appears to be logged in the entire time, or you want to keep some metric or some score or some value that like always increments when they do a specific action. And you want to continue to add or modify that value in the sessions of the app, but then you want it to live, or that value to live as long as the application lives on the user's device. So the shared preferences is a way to do that. So I've actually gone ahead here and found a shared preferences article on our developer.android.com, and I will link this in the description, and you can read about it to kind of get I guess a little bit deeper of an overview, and I guess they talk more about storage overview in general here, and what is available to your application and what isn't, and what requires additional preferences, etc. It says here key value data. You can actually think about shared preferences as like a hash map or some kind of mapping um, for basically just primitives. I think, just like booleans, strings, integers, longs, maybe doubles, but you can basically store anything, not anything, but you could store a lot in just those primitive types. And then if you need something greater than that, you can take a look at some other, like database layers or something along those lines, if you're storing entire objects or whatever the case is. But for our case, we're just going to go ahead and actually update this so that if we were to favorite this tile, kill the app and open it back up again, it'll remain favorited. So it kind of gives that app a more robust feel, kind of provides it that, a little bit more of that professional polish. And, I guess in a real world situation, or, if you're building an app for a company, this list would be fueled by hitting an endpoint. And at that point, you would get this tile back, and is favorited would say true. So you wouldn't have to persist this information, but for now it's just a good example um, to showcase the capabilities here. So um, you can see here shared preferences. You can get it by referencing an activity, calling get shared preferences on it, and then there's a little parameter, or there's two parameters that you'll need to pass into this function, basically the name of the file, and then context mode private, to just make sure that you're telling it that only your application wants to access this file. So we're actually going to go ahead and create a little util. Sorry, that's not going to work. A little util class to kind of hold this for us, just so that we can kind of reference this in any global location. So we're going to go ahead and say shared pref util, and we're going to go ahead and make this an object. And in Kotlin, instead of it being a class, an object here, I guess works similar, but everything that you do in here, if you define a value, if you create a function, is actually seen in code as like a static field. So you no longer have to create, a file and then name everything static. When you're inside an object file in Kotlin, it is just inherent that everything is static and available to the to the rest of your code. So we're going to go ahead and call or create an init function. We're going to need a context, and in here we're going to go ahead and basically do this. And so we will create our late init shared preferences variable, and we will go ahead and set that equal to not our activity, but our context. We're not going to do get string here, but if we take a look, we're going to need the name of the file and then the mode that we want to be viewing it in. So we will leave context mode private, and then we will just say it's good practice to actually preface this name of the file with where is it? Is it in build config? There it is. With your application ID, and then dot shared preferences. Just good practices. Good practice to have this kind of naming convention for considering this file is basically going to exist in like the system, but or at like the system level. So it kind of will, in a way, live outside your application, but only your application will have access to this file. So it's a pretty good idea to actually go ahead and just prefix it with your application ID. And so I haven't talked about this yet, but build config really quickly is this gets generated at compile time, I guess, and it is just a representation of some of the fields that exist in here. So if we were to just quickly take a look at both of these, you can see application ID is in the build.gradle file. We have application ID here, and it is this, and you can see that it's set to here. The build type that we're running right now is the debug build type. It is debug, because of the type that we're running again, version code and version name line up to here. So you can actually reference certain fields that exist in here, and you can actually add more fields or variables into that file, and then they'll exist here in the build config, but we'll get into that at some later date. And then, yeah, so anyway, just a simple way to reference your package without having to actually just write it out. Then we're going to create two private functions. We're actually going to just do booleans. So we're going to say set boolean. We're going to need name, private function, name string, and then value boolean. And so with our shared preferences, you can actually call the edit function that will return the editor. Then you can go ahead and do things here, so you can see what you can put. Actually, you can put booleans, floats, integers, longs, and strings. So we're going to put the name of our boolean and the value associated to it, and then at the end we're going to go ahead and hit commit. And nope, sorry, I believe it's called apply now. Yeah. And then get boolean by your name. Then this will return a boolean. So we will say return shared preferences, get boolean name, and then you can see here there's actually a default value that you can also pass in, or I guess that's required. and we're just going to default the Boolean to false, default an integer to 0 or -1, default a string, sorry, wow, to an empty string or whatever. But we can also do that here in Kotlin just in case we ever need to change it. Default value Boolean equals false. And so this is another, I think we've talked about it before, but this is a default argument, meaning that you can actually call this getBoolean function with either just a string, or if you wanted to, a string and a Boolean. And if you only call this function with a string, it will basically call this function with a string and false passed in as the secondary value. So it's a little helpful tool and whatnot. We're going to go ahead and create a helper function here to actually set the, well, we're going to do it from the activity. We're going to set the ID of the soccer tile here that was pressed when one of them has been favorited. So either favorited or unfavorited, we're going to update that Boolean. So we're going to have the soccer tile at this point in our code, so we're going to be able to reference the ID, and again, another good reason to have IDs associated with your objects so that you can uniquely identify them. So we're going to say set soccer tile favorite. Yeah, not the best name in the world, but we're going to do the ID and then our value. And so here we're going to call our set Boolean function that's going to have ID and value passed in. And then we're going to create the getter for this one, get soccer tile favorite by the ID. It's going to return a Boolean, and then we're going to return get Boolean with our ID. And in this case, this is perfect. You can call this function with just this, or you can do this if you want the default value and change it. We're going to leave it to false because it makes sense, but if we wanted to default all of these to be favorited, we could change them to true, and then everything would work. So we're almost there. We're going to have to call this at some point, and we're going to have to use these two functions. So we talked about the application class. Do we still have it? Yeah. We talked about the application class, and this is a pretty good, this is a pretty good time or a pretty good use case for these kinds of like high-level init moments. So because we have to initialize our shared preferences, we need to give it a context and just call the init function. And basically the reason that we want to do any of this high-level config or initialization at the application level is because this will run before any of your activities will run. Yeah, so the name is EPL application, so that will run. And then, otherwise, well, in this case too, it actually initializes one of our variables that we don't want. If we didn't do that and this was late init, and then we tried using that variable, we would end up crashing at runtime. So we're going to go ahead and initialize things before basically any activity or fragment can reference them, and then at this point we know that we're good to go inside our code here. So we do this stuff here where when someone is favorited, we get the tile, we update the tile, and then we notify the list or that fragment of the favorite being clicked. But what we're also going to do here is we're going to say set soccer tile favorited, do soccer tile .id, and then soccer tile is favorite. And then where is it? No, is favorites at the end? When we're creating this list, we're going to initialize the is favorite field to get soccer tile favorite, and then we're just going to go ahead and copy and paste these things in, right? The ID of this tile itself. And so we're going to just continue to do that, and then we will update our things, and let's see if I can do it in a pretty fancy way. So we're going to Control G to select all of these. Oh, accept that one. We're going to Control Shift G and it's like that. So now we're going to select this entire thing. I'm going to hit Command C to copy this, and if you look now, every single one of our cursors has the ID field here selected or highlighted. So we're going to do Command C. I'm going to go all the way down here. Manchester United is highlighted in all of them, and if we Command V, Manchester City is pasted here on that one, Arsenal is pasted here on this one, Tottenham is pasted here on this one, Liverpool and Chelsea on that. So pretty fun stuff. Just that's probably like the nicest thing to note about the Control G functionality. Basically each cursor kind of gets like its own little memory and whatnot, so you can have 10 cursors copy 10 different things and then paste 10 different things. It's pretty fun. It's interesting. So all right, so let's give Man United a favorite, and let's give Tottenham Spurs a favorite. So nothing else has changed at this point, but if we kill the app and if we pretend that we didn't come back to it for 5 hours or some later date, boom, Manchester United is favorited, and so is Tottenham. And if we say, never mind, we don't like Tottenham anymore, and instead we like Arsenal, and then we kill the app again, and I'm sure you can figure out how this is going to end. Manchester United is favorited, and Arsenal was not, because we don't update the thing there. Right. So if we go to our detail fragment, when we do just got to update our soccer tile here when the menu item is selected. So although we're updating the data behind the scenes, we weren't updating the shared preferences on this particular click. And so then we go ahead and, all right, come on, kill it, and come back. Arsenal is now favorited. So we are successfully storing this this information, and if I can find, okay, here we are in, I guess this is a good example of the device file explorer pane, but if you have your device selected and you go into the data folder and then again the data folder, you'll actually see a whole bunch of packages that exist on your phone. And then if we were to scroll down to our package, we have here the Picasso cache that we learned about, or that we discussed in the other video, but then we also have a shared prefs folder, and as you can see here, this name of the file opens up to be exactly what we named it in our shared pref util. And then if we actually take a look at this file, you can see what we have defined here, and this is exactly what the file, what exists in the file. Manchester United value true, Tottenham value false, and Arsenal value true. And I guess the reason Tottenham is in there is because we, at this point when we click it, we add it to this file, we set it to true, and then we, unselect it and unfavorite it. We don't delete it from the file. We actually just, set the value to be false. Okay, just set the file to be false there. So I guess if we wanted to, by the way, maybe on like a logout functionality, or for some reason you wanted to do this, you could run the clear command or function, which will literally wipe this entire file. So instead of things being set to false, clearing it would just be nuking the entire file, but you'll lose everything. So just be wary of that, but know that it is a possibility that you can actually just go ahead and clear the entire file if you wanted to. So hopefully there were a few things that you had learned here, a a little way to persist some data um, uh, between runs of the application. Super helpful stuff, very easy to just store some critical information or some simple information that you need, on app boot or anything like that. Took a look at the device file explorer pane here that can get pretty overwhelming, but is super helpful for certain things exactly like this to, I guess, kind of enhance our debugging ability. And then, we briefly touched on build config and have our app, just like functioning at this point. Things are looking good. Things are feeling pretty good for where I want this app to be. It's you know, pretty close to being done, to be honest. Maybe there's a few more things we can try to squeeze out of it, and then we'll probably wrap things up. Give you a huge thanks for sticking with me, and we'll start a new season on something a little bit more advanced and just continue the learning. So thank you for sticking with me. Any comments or questions or issues, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. And as always, I will see you in the next one.